Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
The previous lecture, we had stopped at a discussion when the footnote appeared at the foot of the page, and I left you with the thought that, as their name suggests, footnotes obviously appear at the foot of the page, and endnotes, it's possible that a book can have endnotes. Endnotes are then usually located right at the end of that chapter, or they are located right at the end of the book in a whole separate chapter that forms the back matter, then that is known as notes. Now here, something that I want to point out to you, and you will also be realizing over the course of the lectures that I have done so far and the terminology that I have been using, that in book design, in sort of a certain, when we are discussing the layout of the book and where parts of the book appear, the top of the page we are calling obviously the head of the page. Therefore, when you have text that appears on the top of every page, identifying the name of the author and the name of the chapter or the book, if it's on the top of the page, it's known as the running head. If it is at the foot of the page, it is known as the running feet. Therefore, footnotes that appear at the bottom, that's where the word foot is coming in. Notes appearing at the foot of the page are known as footnotes. If you can see the slide that I am sharing with you right now, what is of vital importance while you are typesetting the book is to remember that footnotes are always 1 or 2 sizes smaller than the body text. On an average, the body text should go between sizes 10 to size 11. In that case, the footnotes should be between size 8 and size 9. Notes are always of secondary importance to the text, and therefore the size of typeface or the size of font that you use must be smaller than the body text and never larger. They are meant to be smaller because the idea is that they are secondary text, they have supporting information, or they have additional information. Sometimes they have what we call a digression. The reader may read it simultaneously, the reader may read it afterward, the reader may not read it at all. What is vital is that they do not distract from the experience of reading the main body text. In this particular slide that I am sharing with you, I would also like you to pay attention to the fact that the display title, or what you would otherwise call the chapter heading, and the numbers that we have used for indicating the number of the note, these two typefaces as well as the footfolio or the page number at the bottom of the page, these two typefaces, they are in fact actually the same. They might look different to the eye, but this is a typeface that is known as a sans serif. S-A-N-S, pronounced sans serif, or without serif. We will have a separate lecture on typography where I will discuss the difference even more in greater detail, but effectively a serif font is the font that has come to us distilled over time as a condensed, crisper, now a mechanized or digitized version of the very initial books that were written, or rather manuscripts that were written by hand. And so, if you're looking at a serif typeface, if you ever do this experiment of typing out a line in a serif font in a Microsoft Word document, and then if you really increase the size or you increase the percentage of your view, you will notice that each alphabet has little, what I call little protrusions. If these are leftovers from the cursive handwriting, whereas the more modern kind of typeface is smooth, is meant to be primarily, or was at one point meant to be primarily used for online reading. Those typefaces, the kind that you have on your phone, the kind that you see mainly on Facebook, Twitter, all of the social media, a lot of the online journals, websites, those smooth typefaces with nothing sticking out at the end or at the base of letters, those typefaces are known as sans serif, or in English, non-serif fonts. When you are doing the design or the layout for a book, even if it is only text, you may contemplate a little bit of variety by mixing a serif and a non-serif font. Usually, we like to save the non-serif fonts for the text that is more ornamental, that is secondary to the main text. The eye is habituated to reading the main text in a primarily serif font, so we don't tamper with that. But we bring in variety by virtue of the second non-serif font in places such as the display titles, numbers, superscript numbers, running heads, running feet, and so on. I have just mentioned a word called superscript numbers. If you look at the second line of this particular paragraph, you will see that there is a number 1. A number 1 that is slightly smaller and that sits above the line of text. It's positioned a little higher, hence the word super. Super often refers to things that are raised above the average. Hence, if you can remember Superman, those of you who are familiar, Superman is called Superman because he can fly above the ground. Here, a script is super when it is above the baseline that is followed by the other lines of text. A superscript number is a little number that sits there quietly on the edge of a word and indicates to the reader that somewhere either on this page or at the end of the chapter or at the end of a book, there is a note. Superscript numbers, when they are present, sometimes they are present in mathematical equations. Subscript numbers, if you are familiar with a bit of chemistry, subscript numbers are present in chemistry equations. So, CO2 or H2O, that 2 that sits at the bottom of the line, even when you write it with hand, that is a subscript number. Whereas, numbers or asterisks that indicate the presence of a note, those are superscript. Also note that where the footnote appears at the bottom of the text, the only formatting that we apply to a footnote is that we reduce the font size. We don't do anything else to it. I am saying this in detail because on the next page, I want to compare it with, I suspect I have endnotes, and yes, I do. I want to show you their positioning and a second level of formatting that we apply. The top pair of pages or the top spread that I have for you is from a chapter in an academic book. In that book, there were notes at the end of every chapter, thereby what I have just discussed, they were called endnotes. If you look at the endnotes, the first change they have in common with footnotes is that endnotes also require a smaller typeface. Okay, because they are not as important as the text, they are supplementary information, and therefore the typeface becomes at least one size smaller than the main text. Now, if you look very carefully, you will notice that this is a numbered list. The endnotes start at 1 and they carry on then for a few pages. Every time you come across a list, you must apply hanging indentation. This is one piece of formatting or one piece of typesetting which marks out the endnotes separately from the footnotes. Please bear in mind that footnotes do not require hanging indentation. They appear as a block at the bottom of the page. Endnotes, whether they appear at the end of a chapter or at the end of a book, the application of hanging indentation is mandatory because then they appear as a continuous list. I am saying this and alerting you to a problem sometimes that is happening, which is sometimes in Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word automatically applies hanging indentation to a footnote. And many typesetters are unaware of this, and they are reproducing books, they are designing books, they are typesetting books, but they are not removing the hanging indentation from a footnote. Please do so please apply hanging indentation only in the case of an end note. If you see here, why am I making such a fuss? You must be wondering about hanging indentation. If you look at the list on your screen, you will notice in hanging indentation, basically what happens is the first line hangs out, second line onwards comes at a little indent. So, in the case of a list, what it does is it pulls out the number of the list item, and when you're reading the book and you want to quickly come to note number 19, or you're in the middle of some other chapter and you quickly want to come to note 22, if those numbers are hanging out, it makes the process of seeking them out so much more easy, thereby making the reading process a little bit more pleasurable for the reader. At the bottom of this particular page, I have deliberately got two examples for you. On the left hand side are a few endnotes that do not have hanging indentation, whereas on the right hand side is the same block with hanging indentation. The minute you look at the margin, you will notice how it is very difficult to read the notes that do not have hanging indentation, because the note number is getting mixed up with the rest of the text. Notes often have page numbers, notes often have dates, and if you also have the identifier number for that note, all those numbers then become they present a very jumbled appearance to the poor reader who is trying to get to the right note entry. Therefore, if you look immediately to the right, you will notice what a pleasurable and much more easy to navigate list is that list, because it in fact does have hanging indentation. This is an option that I wanted to share with you. It is not very frequently done. It is rarely done, but depending on your content and depending on the size of your page, you could imagine sometimes the presence of margin notes in your book. This is not a conventional or very traditional method of dealing with notes, but it is perfectly permissible, sometimes looks very interesting, and is, you are allowed to do this, but you have to be a little careful, because sometimes you have to keep in mind, is my page width broad enough to have enough of a text block and enough of a margin area in which I can fit my notes. But if you look here, there is a spread of pages on the top. Please also note the alignment of the margin. The alignment of the note margin follows the inner box edge, so that the ragged outside falls towards the outer edge of the book and doesn't disturb the eye too much. The one on the lower left, you can see it was actually a square format book. So, beyond the main text block, we had quite a wide margin, and in the margin it was also possible to put the occasional picture of the person who was being discussed in the text. There was room for a picture caption, and there was also adequate room for notes. And the one on the right hand side is very interesting, because there the book has been designed so that the note box, we have created little white boxes for the notes if you look closely, and you will be able to tell that we have left a bit of white space also on all four sides of that note, so that yes, it's smaller, yes, it's cutting into the text, but there is enough gap between the body text and the note, so that the reader is not left with any confusion about which level of text stands for what. In this particular book that I am discussing, we had also represented the notes in a shade of grey. We realized that their presence was cutting into the main text. We did not even want them to have the same color, so we have just made them a shade of black, which is in fact what you and I know as grey, so that while they seem to occupy the same space, they are a quieter color and they don't detract or distract from the main text. Sometimes it is possible, depending again on the content of a book, to have unnumbered footnotes. You may have a certain kind of novel, you might have a book of poetry, you might have a very lyrical, evocative kind of prose, it could be a book on philosophy. You don't want to then clutter the book with notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which sometimes people feel gives the book a very academic look. In that case, the numbers are substituted with asterisks. An asterisk is available on your keyboard. If you look for it, you will need to press Shift. It looks like a tiny little star or a tiny little flower, depending on which typeface you're using. It is used, it automatically comes next to a word in the superscript position, and then at the bottom of your screen it will start flashing, and that's where the definition or the note appears. It is possible to have notes in the book indicated only with asterisks, and you don't need to add the numbers at all. This is often an editorial decision, but you should be aware that this is possible to do. In this case, the appearance of an end note may be also indicated not with a number, but with an asterisk or some other text ornament. Some writers, like I just mentioned, may not want the presence of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, kind of cluttering up the text on the page. They will very gently put an asterisk, and then they will go further. They will tell you that they don't in fact want the asterisk connected to a footnote at the bottom of the page. They would like the note to appear at the end of the book. So asterisked, which means unnumbered footnotes, are possible. Asterisked or unnumbered endnotes are also possible. In that case, often what we do is we have a section called notes which appears at the back of the book, and there we identify the asterisk by page number starting from the start of the book. Otherwise, the reader will be confused. So we will say page 24. Sometimes we reproduce a part of the sentence, and then we give the explanation of what it is that had the asterisk. For a multi-author volume, notes and references appear for each chapter at the end of that particular chapter. If the book is by one author only, and there are 10 chapters, and the author wants endnotes, then either it appears at the end of each chapter, or you can bunch up all the notes and have them appear right at the end of the book. When you have a book by different authors, maybe a collection of 12 essays, 13 essays, whatever, then every author's essay becomes like a little book in itself. There you can't, or at least you shouldn't, bunch up all their notes and references at the end of the book, forcing the reader to go very far to locate the information that they are seeking. In that case, the notes, the references, or sometimes, as I've said, it may be called select bibliography, references cited, whatever the section is addressed as, these two things at least must appear at the end of that chapter itself. Then you finish with that chapter and you turn the page, and the new chapter begins again with a display title, the person's name, etc., etc., etc. Captions for images or maps or tables. Image, map or table captions also must always be in a font size smaller than that of the main text. They are informative, they are important, but they should not compete in size and appearance with the main text. So we try and make them at least one size smaller, just as we do the notes and the references. Sometimes we also use the non-serif font inside the caption boxes, inside the tables, just for a bit of typographic or visual difference. As you can see here on the top pair of pages, on the left we have a table. In the table, we have gone with a completely non-serif look. The numbers, the categories, all of that has been used in non-serif, so that you then realize the table is data, it contains statistics, you read it differently compared to the running language of the body text, which is appearing in a serif font. And below, on the example below, you will notice we have two photographs somehow connected to the content, and each photograph has a caption underneath it. On the page below as well as on the page above, please note that when we have inserted the table, when we have inserted the photographs, the top of the table, the bottom of the table caption, and on the lower example, the top of the photograph and the bottom of the photo, we are trying to match the top margin and the bottom margin of the facing page as much as possible, so that the space that is occupied by the text block on the right hand side is more or less the same amount of space that is occupied by the other kind of object on the left hand side. This is to ensure a smooth reading experience. you will know that once you are into the book, every time you turn the page, the first line falls. Your eye gets used to where the first line is falling. So as you're going along, this ensures that the minute you turn the page, your eye will fall on the table caption, and then you will read the table before you proceed to the next page. Similarly, in the book below, when you turn the page, your eye will fall on the first almost line of the photograph. You will look at the two photographs and then you will read the text. So make sure that even though you have disparate objects, on one side you have text, on the other side you might have a picture, you might have 2 or 3 or 4 pictures, you might have a table, you might have a map. Try and keep the space occupied by the visual the same space as is occupied by the block of text on the facing page. Having finished with the main text, I would now like to discuss with you the ideal arrangement of the back matter. So we have done with the front matter, which was the introductory or preliminary pages to the text. Then we began the text on page 1, and I've discussed all the various elements that will come in. You will need to plan for the running head, the running feet, their typeface, their size, their position. The same applies to the page number. Then you will need to plan how much space you want to leave on all 4 sides of the page so that you have your text block. You will need to plan your typeface and its size. You will need to plan for subheadings, how much space you will leave before or after them, what typeface will you use, are you just going to go with the same font with different styles such as bold, italic, all caps and small caps applied, or will you perhaps go with a serif and a non-serif combination to pull out some of those additional kinds of texts. And depending on the kind of book you are designing, you will have to look out for the notes and where they appear and how they appear. If they are endnotes, they need hanging indentation. If they are footnotes, they don't. But all the supplementary materials such as notes, captions, etc., all of this, please remember, must be in a font size that is smaller than the body text. So now we have got 2/3 of the book that is done already. Now we come to the last 1/3 of the book, which is the back matter. Once the last chapter has been taken care of, we approach what back matter there is and how, if you do have it. Often there may be no back matter at all, in which case there is no need to panic. But if you do have it, then here are some options, and here is, as I keep repeating, their ideal arrangement. You may have acknowledgements as part of the back matter if the author wishes to shift it there. You may have an afterword. You may have 1 or more appendices. There could be a chronology if it's not part of the front matter. There could be a list of abbreviations if it is not part of the front matter. We can have notes, glossary, bibliography or references. We can have notes on contributors. When it is a book where many people have written, then you can imagine trying to put all their little introductory notes, their bio notes on the back of the book cover is not going to be possible. We will then have to give them space at the back of the book, followed by illustration credits if any, an index and a colophon, and I would like to now gently take you through each of these to explain what they are and why they are there. An afterword is a brief concluding word, literally the opposite of a preface. If it is something that introduces the book, it must come in first. Right at the beginning, we have discussed this. If it is something that the author, the reader must read after reading the work, if it contains information, if it contains comments on the work that will only make sense once you have read the book, then it follows the main text and is known as an afterword, commonsensical enough label because it comes after. An afterword could be by the author, it could be by a guest writer, it could also be by the translator. Sometimes there is a lot of interesting material that the author might have located related to the book. These could be photographs, these could be letters, these could be scanned material. The author as a researcher may have visited an archive and had been able to either scan or get scanned copies of some very rare manuscript material. in which case the author might wish to put all of this into the book. All of this has a certain archival importance, it all has a certain historic importance, but it need not be right in the middle of the book, it need not be a part of the body text. In that case, all of this additional information, which kind of complements the text, lifts it up to a certain level, supplements your worldview of that particular argument, all of this can appear at the back as extra material. Extra material, the official term for it in book design terminology is appendix. You can have appendix A, B, C, D, etc. The plural is not appendixes, but appendices. Now here, this was a book on the music of the Bauls or the wandering minstrels in West Bengal. The person who has written the book spent many years with them, traveling around with them, listening to their songs, documenting their songs, etc., etc. In case you are unfamiliar with the Bauls, it's spelled B-A-U-L, and you may look it up on Wikipedia or elsewhere on the internet to learn more about them. In this particular case, I have reproduced for you two appendices. Appendix A contains song texts. There is an index of the first line of the songs that have been discussed, and because there was no proper, at least when this book came out fairly early on, before there was a kind of larger interest in the Bauls, before it was possible to record them, tape them, have their music on the internet and so on. At the time at which this particular author did the research, even the script of the Baul song text was not available. The Bauls are, as I mentioned, wandering musicians. You can only pick them up if you were sort of born either to a Baul or you apprenticeship, you kind of apprentice with them. It's like an oral transmission. They teach you, they train you, but only by listening. There are no notations that are written down. There are no words that are written down. So you can imagine that in this particular book, which contained this information, it was vital to have the song texts appear. You need not read the full song when you are reading the main text, but it's of historic importance to have them, to present you with them, because it was probably one of the first instances where the lyrics of these songs were actually documented. So Appendix A has the song texts. There is a sort of transliterated version of the Bengali and or the Bengali dialect in English, and then the author has translated them for the non-Bengali reader. Please note the difference in the type treatment. Appendix A is actually a label. The main display text is the word song texts. Appendix A therefore is a little smaller. The word song text is much larger and establishes at once what this section is all about. And there is a subhead which is then in upper lower small caps. The lower one, the lower page, is the music notation for each of these songs. Now you can imagine these notations were actually perhaps composed by the author, where he sat with the Bauls, he listened to the music, and then almost like a map, he created these notations. So it is an extraordinarily valuable resource for the reader, for somebody interested in the Baul songs, but it has no place in the middle of the main text. The main text has a different argument. It discusses how the Bauls came about, perhaps what their religious inclinations are, if there are any, why do they wander about, how did they come about, what are the areas of India that they inhabit, what are their lives like, how do they compose their songs, what is the subject matter of the songs, etc. While you are reading all of that, at that point, the music notation is not important, but it is an invaluable resource. And it should be saved for future generations, because the Bauls themselves are often not, they have not been to school, they have not learned to read or write. So they have no way of often documenting the, their own music, of holding on to it, unless they just pass it on verbally to somebody who wants to learn from them. So all of this has come into the appendix. Like I said, it is possible to contain the supplementary material within this chapter called appendix. Now we come to a very large format book. As you can see, this particular page is a big square format page, and therefore the typesetter has made very clever use of the page by using 4 columns, so that we can put in as much material as possible. 4 or 3 columns is great only when you have a very big page, because the reading line, if it goes beyond 4, 5, maybe 5.5 inches, the eye gets very tired by the time it arrives at the end of the line. So when you have very large pages, we then tend to sort of break up the space and see if maybe we can have 2-column text, or then we think of the idea of margin notes, because we can shorten the main text line and yet not waste that margin space, but use it up for the notes. Be aware of this. Here you have a chapter of end notes. There's 4 columns, which end notes at the back of the book basically means all the notes from the chapters are going to now appear in sequence. Therefore, you can see the typesetter has put in the heading of each chapter to indicate to you what notes where. The first is the preface. It has only 1 note. The second is a chapter called Introduction, a long walk. It has, as you can see, almost 31 notes. Then you have the second chapter, and so on and so forth. You need to tell the reader, when you collect all the notes and you put them at the end of a book, you need to tell the reader where to look for which note in which chapter. So the chapter titles are repeated. Please also note the 2 points that I have mentioned before with reference to notes, which is that hanging indentation has been applied, the point size is considerably smaller, and very importantly, quite a bit of space has been left between the start, the last note of one chapter and the start of the next. This again makes it easier, as well as the use of bold. This makes it much easier for the reader to quickly jump to the chapter they are looking for, and then within that to jump to the note number that they are looking for. The next bit is a very interesting bit called a glossary. It is from the same very large book that I have just been discussing. A glossary appears at the back of a book like a mini dictionary. A glossary is always alphabetically arranged. We have not discussed this at all so far, so I'm going to take 5 minutes of your time and tell you about the editorial purpose of having a glossary. A glossary appears like a mini dictionary at the back of a book. It appears very often in works of translation, because a translated work which is picking up from a language and bringing the story into English often retains some words, some phrases, some names, some terms from that language. So if, for example, I was translating from the Bengali into English, it is possible that even after my translation, in the course of the story, when you read it in English, you might find very often the words like dada or didi or mashi, meshu, so on and so forth. You might also find the names of food like paish or khichuri or labra or muroghonto and so on. Sometimes these are not translatable, so the translator leaves them as it is. Sometimes they are deliberate choices to give you a feel of the sound of the original language. But we all recognize that just leaving these words unattended in the main text is only going to sometimes confuse the reader. The reader should know what we are referring to. It is not possible for every reader to know every single other language in the world. So what we then do is those words are collected and represented in the glossary. They are arranged alphabetically and brief definitions are given. So therefore, the term that I used in the beginning will help you visualize a glossary better, which is that it functions like a mini dictionary in the book. All the foreign, so-called foreign words and phrases, all the original language words and phrases are isolated and little definitions are provided, so that at the end of the story, the reader can go and see what those words mean. A glossary should contain the more frequently occurring words and phrases. A glossary should contain fairly brief definitions. If a longer explanation is required, if it is if it's an item or a word that has a lot of cultural importance, in the native language, if it is connected to a particular ritual or a particular custom, then and it needs a long explanation, then that should become a note and not be a glossary. A glossary is for the more commonly occurring words and phrases. As you can see here, this is a very beautifully arranged glossary. First of all, there is a bit of an editorial note on the glossary which appears on top immediately after the display title. You can see the word glossary is very large. It's in grey, that is known as the display title. And then after the explanatory note, we are back to the 4-column formatting again, and very beautiful little bit of a type differentiation has been followed here. The word or phrase that is being glossed appears in bold, and just underneath it the definition appears in regular upper lower case text. So no problem in understanding, oh, this is the word and oh, that's the definition. The minute you look at the first pair of words, you automatically realize how the glossary will unfold. So if you're looking for a particular word and its explanation, you need to only look at the bold words. When you find the word you're looking for, you can read the definition for it, right? So just a little touch, but how the typography design is helping lift this and make it infinitely more readable. This is another kind of glossary. I'm trying to show you as many variations as possible. This glossary is what you may see more often because you have sort of slender books. On the whole, we rarely have those wide format books. Most often a glossary is 2-column. Very, very often a glossary is 2-column. The word that is being glossed or explained appears in italic, and on the other side of the column you can see the brief fragmentary definitions that are provided over here. Some publishers like to have very brief definitions, almost broken phrases in a glossary. Some publishers will have longer explanations in the glossary. Okay, whatever is required, it depends very much on the content, it depends very much on what kind of information is being offered. Please note the upper page glossary here is a 2-column glossary. The one at the bottom is almost like a list and therefore is alphabetically arranged as a glossary should be. But what is interesting is because it is like a list, it may not have the numbers, but hanging indentation has been applied so that the word in question again is sticking out a little bit, and you can very quickly then look for the word that you are not able to understand and see if there is a definition. At the back of a book must also be the section called Select Bibliography. It can be Select Bibliography, which means the author has given you a list of some of the books that they read in order to compile their research. When it only says bibliography, it refers to the fact that every book that the author has read, every book that the author has quoted from, drawn inspiration from, they have organized again by in a sort of alphabetical arrangement. Bear in mind that bibliographies or references cited are organized alphabetically, no doubt, but alphabetically by surname. So my name, Sunandini Banerjee, will appear in the bibliography section as Banerjee, Sunandini. So please remember, they are reversed. The surname comes first. This is connected to the practice of how authors are often referred to by their second name in the text, either when a book by them or a paper by them is being referred to or quoted from. Select bibliography, like notes, like glossary or bibliography, whatever the section is called, they can also be in a font size that is smaller than the main text. It's absolutely not a problem. They have to have hanging indentation. I would heartily recommend that if you are typesetting a bibliography, basically a list of references, no matter how short or how long it is, please provide hanging indentation. Over subsequent classes, we will discuss how to do that in the software itself, but stylistically be aware that it is a list and the surname must stick out a little bit, and that sticking out, that we are using layperson's terminology, the sticking out is made possible by the application of a hanging indentation. A bibliography can be of various kinds. On top, the 2-page example that I have, The author has decided to be very organized. The author has said in the first section of the bibliography, you will notice there is a subhead. It says books and articles. In the second, it says exhibition catalogues. It's possible that this was a book on art, and the author has realized that if I put books, articles and exhibition catalogues together, it will just be too messy, it will be too overwhelming for the reader. So let me separate my zones of research by their nature. Books and articles may be looked up online. Catalogues are often only found at the exhibition gallery or in museum shops. So there are two different avenues of accessing this material, and that is how the author has clustered them up. On the bibliography below, we see that this was a book where a writer called Leopold Sedar Senghor was under discussion. So what the author has done is they have put together the primary works or the works by Senghor himself, so that you know which works by this author are under discussion. And then you have a second subheading that says secondary works, which means these are the books by Senghor that are the bulk of this discussion. Secondary works refers to people who have written on those works, people who have written on Senghor, whose work also this author has read. Some people have agreed with Senghor, some people may have disagreed, some have praised him, some have criticized him. The author has read all of that and then formed his own opinion and then written this book, and has decided very sensibly that when I do my bibliography, let me put all the Senghor books together, because those are the primary works, and everything everybody else has said about Senghor becomes the secondary works, and therefore the bibliography has been arranged this way. It is entirely possible. You as the typesetter do not have to worry about arranging any of this. The editor or the author will do it for you. What you do have to worry about is if you see a subhead within the bibliography, you have to figure out how you want that subhead represented. Will you make it bold? Will you make it small caps? Will you make it all caps? Etc. Here we have something interesting, which is we have an annotated bibliography. An annotated bibliography basically means a bibliography with explanations. The author has a whole list of books that they have read, and underneath each book they are telling you this is a good book, or this book has extra information at the back, this book has some fabulous pictures, this book has the photograph of a rare manuscript, a little note on what is significant about that book. Therefore, the author has annotated the bibliography. Annotations often means provided notations, provided explanations. It is absolutely possible also to have something called an annotated bibliography, which appears at the back of the book and can be in a typeface smaller than the book, and can be and should in fact be set with hanging indentation. The next bit is something that I've just discussed when I've been talking about a multi-author volume. A multi-author volume means there are 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 different authors. They have each contributed either an article in an encyclopedia or a paper in this book or an essay. All of them need to have their little life story, their little academic or other kind of notable literary accomplishments presented to the reader. This comes at the back of a book in a section called Notes on Contributors. It is a much more neat way of representing them rather than having a write-up on them at the end of each contribution itself on the page. It can make the page look very messy. Often at the end of their article or at the end of their essay, there is just not enough room. So it's best to take those out, to isolate them at the back of the book in a section called Notes on Contributors. This ideally should have been done by the editor, whoever they may be. Notes on Contributors can follow two formats. Notes on Contributors can either be alphabetically arranged, or even better, they should be arranged in the order in which the works have appeared in the book. And you may or may not put hanging indentation to this list, but I would draw your attention to the slide that I'm sharing with you, because there you'll notice at least the name of the author has been picked out in upper lower caps and it has been picked out in bold, so that if you have been struck in particular by an essay and you want to know more about the person who has read it, Remember the table of contents in the beginning? When you were going through the front matter, you will have noticed the book had a note on contributors. When you read an essay or a short story or some part that really touches you or moves you or intrigues you, and you want to know more about the person who has written it, you can then get to the back to the notes on contributors and read up on that particular person, right? Highlight the names in some form or the other typographically when you are working on a notes on contributors. In many books, illustration credits can come at the front of the book. In many books, the illustration credits can come at the back. For whatever reason, there may not be space on the page or in the slot that has been allotted for the photograph caption or the painting caption for all the information that is required. In that case, because remember, any photograph or any picture, often paintings or artworks, when you have a caption, they must contain the name of the artist, the name of the work, the size, the medium, the date of creation, which museum it is currently hanging in, and who took the photograph that is used in the book, who gave you permission to use the image of that artwork in the book. That's quite a substantial bit to put into a photo caption, and therefore sometimes publishers or authors think it a better option to have illustration credits right at the back of the book. There are just a few parts left to wind up our discussion of the back matter. We will conclude with that in our next lecture and then carry on with other aspects that we should keep in mind while first understanding the book that we are designing, organizing the material, and then representing them typographically.
Hi, I'm Chitwan Lalji, a PhD student of Health Economics under the supervision of Dr. Debayan Pakrashi from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Kanpur. In one of my essays, I'm interested in understanding the relationship between consumption of fruits and vegetables and various health indicators. Health indicators, both subjective and objective health indicators like mental health, self-assessed health, various measures of blood pressure and various measures of cholesterol. Measures of blood pressure like systolic and diastolic BP, you have your incidence of high BP, MAP, and incidence of high MAP. And as far as cholesterol is concerned, I have tried to concentrate more on total cholesterol, good cholesterol, and incidence of high cholesterol. Now, before I go on to what have been my major contributions and various policy implications, I would like to briefly tell you about the policy initiatives of WHO and various countries. The WHO, that is the World Health Organization, it started with a campaign of 5 a day. That is, you should have 5 portions of fruits and vegetables per day. That would be approximately, you could say, 400 grams of fruits and vegetables. Now, a portion, before we go further, I'll just tell you what exactly is a portion. One portion is equivalent to a medium-sized apple, or one small glass of fruit juice, which is approximately 150 milliliters, and maybe 3 teaspoons of vegetables. So, the WHO went with a 5 a day campaign, which was further taken up by various countries. Countries like UK, Netherlands, Germany, Norway, they adopted the 5 a day policy, while some went for expansionary dietary policies like France, Australia, Canada, Denmark. So, for example, Australia, it went for 2+5 policy, in which it said that you should consume 2 portions of fruits and 5 portions of vegetables per day. And USA went for a policy of fruits and vegetables more matters. That is, you must consume more and more fruits and vegetables. Now, irrespective of these expansionary dietary policies and dietary propagations, it has been found that only 28% of women and 25% of men, they actually meet the recommended dietary norms of 5 a day portion. So the major contribution of my work is firstly to find an association between fruits and vegetables, whether there exists a relationship between fruits and vegetables and health indicators, and if they exist, whether due to heterogeneity in the data, so I will be doing it according to age, by gender and by your weight. So apart from that, I will go for policy recommendations, in which I am basically studying how much fruits and vegetables matter. Apart from that, which type matters more. So for that, I have taken data from the Health Survey of England. Health Survey of England is an annual survey which takes data, which conducts information regularly on demographic and socioeconomic characteristics. You have your lifestyle behaviors, like an individual smokes or doesn't smoke, alcohol consumption, you have your sedentary and physical activities, and you have various health indicators also which have been collected. Before I go on to what exactly is my research, I would like to concentrate more on fruits and vegetables, like what kind of questions were asked in the survey. Questions like, what kind of fresh fruit do you eat? Did you eat any dried fruit yesterday? Don't count dried fruits in cereals, cakes. Apart from that, for vegetables, they asked how many tablespoons of vegetables did you eat yesterday? So approximately after this whole survey was conducted, data was converted into portions of fruits, and like for example, 3 tablespoons of vegetables is equivalent to 1 portion. So data was converted and provided to the users, that is us, from the UK Data Health Survey. So the major contributions of my paper is that I found a strong negative association between intake of fruits and self-assessed health, then various measures of blood pressure like mean arterial pressure, high blood pressure, systolic and diastolic BP, and your total cholesterol. Apart from that, I have found a strong positive association between consumption of vegetables and good cholesterol. So it is recommended in a way that if you want to control your blood pressure, you must consume more and more fruits. And as far as vegetables are concerned, they impact your good cholesterol. Apart from that, I went in for a falsification test. A falsification test is basically conducted to know whether the model that you have adopted and the conclusions that you are drawing are not spurious. So if a falsification test is done to know, in a way it is tested by seeing an indicator, a health indicator which is not being impacted by your consumption of fruits and vegetables, and then we see whether there is significant result or not. If there is no significant result, that means your model is good and your results are non-spurious. So what we did is, for falsification test, we took ear complaints and infectious diseases. Now ear complaints, like if you are deaf since birth or you have some kind of imbalance, body imbalance, that is not being impacted by your consumption of fruits and vegetables, and we did find insignificant results. Apart from that, infectious diseases like HIV, AIDS, etc., we found similar insignificant results, indicating that our results are not non-spurious. Apart from that, we went, since there was a lot of heterogeneity in the data, like by gender, by age and by weight, we did the regression analysis. We found results which stated that as far as fruits are concerned, it impacts a male's health more than a female's health. So it is basically said a man should consume more fruits to impact his health, whereas as far as vegetables are concerned, they impact a woman's health more. But this has been only seen as far as cholesterol is concerned, the various measures of cholesterol like total cholesterol, good cholesterol and your incidence of getting high cholesterol. Now after this, we went in for a policy implication, and in the policy implication we tried to find 2 policy implications: what matters and exactly how much portion matters. So as far as how much portion matters, we have found that on an average 5 or more portions of fruits impact your overall health, that is your self-assessed health, your MAP, your incidence of high MAP and incidence of high BP. But if you want to have a good mental health, so you can optimize your mental health by consuming 3 or 4 portions of fruits as well. And similarly, as far as self-assessed health and total cholesterol is concerned, an individual must consume 4 to 5 portions to optimally have the impact of consumption of fruits. Apart from that, vegetables have had a very little impact on your health. It only impacts your incidence of getting high MAP and high BP, and it's seen that only it impacts when you consume 5 or more portions of fruits. So, an optimum consumption of 5 or more portions of fruits and vegetables are recommended, but fruits have a more impact on your overall health, on various measures like self-assessed health, mental health, your various measures of blood pressure and various cholesterol levels. Another thing that we find is which type of fruit matters. It has been seen that all size fruits, they impact your self-assessed health, your systolic and diastolic blood pressure, your mean arterial pressure, your high BP and incidence of getting high MAP and high cholesterol. But we find that as far as frozen fruits or canned fruits are concerned, they help in regulating your incidence of getting high MAP or high BP, but it has a trade-off. That means there is something negative happening. It reduces the good cholesterol in your body. Apart from this, if you have an incidence of getting high cholesterol, it is recommended that you must consume fruit juices because it has a impact in reducing your probability of getting high cholesterol. And dried fruits, they impact your self-assessed health. As far as vegetables are concerned, very little impact has been seen. It has only been seen in case of portion of salads and its association with self-assessed health. Another thing that they have seen is vegetables in composite, they have an association with good cholesterol. So overall, my research basically says that there is an association between consumption of fruits and vegetables and various health indicators, and it is highly recommended that an individual, in order to be healthy, must consume 5 or more portions of fruits and 5 or more portions of vegetables per day, but fruits have a more impact on your overall health. Apart from that, all size fruits, they have a better impact on your overall health, your mental health, various measures of blood pressure and cholesterol. So, thank you.
Understanding oneself, understanding others, understanding society at large, understanding the nature, these are all driven by basic human curiosity. We would all love to understand why things happen, what happens, what is the final outcome, why certain things fail. These are all exercises that we perform in various domains of knowledge. Therefore, knowledge in various domains, you would realize they are actually social artifacts. They have to be rooted into historical perspective, they have to be culturally salient, and there would be socio-political reasons behind this. Whether you talk with respect to engineering sciences, whether you talk with respect to physical sciences, biological sciences, social sciences, that is the reason why humanities and social sciences should be understood by all of us. The knowledge that is segregated, that is divided with respect to areas, specializations, all of them needs to be understood in its context. And what provides the context? It is the social reality. How do you correlate knowledge in a given domain with the cultural reality, with the social reality, with the socio-political compulsions? Okay, how do you understand the law of nature, okay, in its totality? And for doing that, you require the understanding of humanities and social sciences. Say for instance, if you are trying to understand the effect of a particular bacteria, a virus, any microbe, how it affects behavior, how it affects the organism, human being, you start looking at it from a pure biological point of view. If you are trying to look at a particular type of a wavelength, say for example, you are emphasizing on the understanding of the effect of radiation on human life, you are looking at things from a physical point of view. You are looking at the corresponding changes inside the body, you are looking at the physiological side of the understanding of the information. You are trying to understand why, despite knowing the risk that is inbuilt in the process, why still human beings engage into it. You are looking at it from a pure behavioral point of view. Why society at large admire things which has full of risk, you are trying to understand things from a pure sociological point of view. Why people use particular set of words to explain those experiences, you are trying to understand things from the linguistic point of view. So, there are whole lot of things, and then finally you try to combine all of them to say that what are the guiding principles in life. Then you say you are looking at life, you are looking at humanity from a pure philosophical point of view. And this is what social sciences courses provide you. They provide the context to you in which you would be finally positioning the understanding of the knowledge in any given domain. It could be engineering, it could be sciences, it could be medical sciences, it could be social sciences stuff, it could be humanities stuff. So, contextualizing the knowledge is what humanities social science courses help you obtain.